I never thought my quiet retirement would turn into a battlefield. But when your dream home becomes someone else's playground, you either surrender or fight back. My name's Marcus Hale, a retired electrician who spent 3 decades wiring half the city's hospitals and shopping malls. After 30 years of climbing ladders and chasing overtime, all I wanted was peace, a small corner lot, some green grass, and quiet mornings with my wife, Claire. Claire had been diagnosed with early-stage Parkinson's 2 years ago. She couldn't drive anymore, couldn't manage long walks like before, so I promised her a sanctuary, a calm little world of our own. I spent months turning that patch of dirt into a masterpiece, $2,500 worth of premium bluegrass, a fully automated sprinkler system I wired myself, and garden lights that hummed softly at dusk. It wasn't just a lawn. It was hope, something to remind us that life still had beauty left, and then she showed up. At first I thought the tire marks across my lawn were an accident, a one-time mistake. But the next morning they were back. Same deep grooves in the grass, same smell of burnt rubber and diesel fumes. On the third day I set up a camera, 7:48 a.m. sharp. There she was, a white BMW X5 slicing straight across my property like she owned it. Behind the wheel sat a woman who looked like she'd never been told no in her entire life. Her name? Karen Whitmore, the neighborhood's self-appointed queen. She lived 2 blocks down in a mansion that looked more like a Vegas hotel than a family home. Her husband owned Whitmore Construction, the company that built most of the homes around here. The license plate on her car said MS Whit. The arrogance fit perfectly. I decided to be polite. I walked over that afternoon, still in my work boots, and said, "Excuse me, ma'am. I think you might have driven across my lawn this morning." She didn't even look up, just kept trimming her roses. It's a public neighborhood, isn't it? Maybe don't plant so close to the road. My patience cracked a little. That's actually my property. I have survey stakes. She turned then with that smile, the kind people give right before stabbing you in the back. Are you threatening me? Because my husband built this neighborhood. I'm on the HOA board. You really don't want to start problems here, sweetie. The word sweetie hit harder than I expected, like she was patting me on the head. I walked back home in silence. Claire saw my face from the window. I tried to smile for her, but inside something was already shifting. You see, I've spent my life installing permanent systems, things built to last. When an electrician like me decides to fix a problem, he doesn't go for temporary solutions. That night I sat at my desk, staring at the old blueprints of our lot, the survey papers, and my electrical notes. If Karen wanted to turn this into a game, she was about to learn what happens when you mess with a man who knows exactly how deep foundations go. When words fail, some men build solutions that speak louder than noise. In my case, they spoke in 8,000 lumens. After that first confrontation, I tried to let it go. I really did. Claire told me, "Honey, maybe she'll stop if you ignore her." But Claire didn't see what I saw every morning. The fresh tire tracks, the shredded blades of grass that looked like open wounds across my lawn. Every morning at 7:47 a.m., like clockwork, that white BMW would scream around the corner and slice across my property. It wasn't an accident anymore. It was a ritual, and rituals are meant to be broken. That Saturday, I drove down to Tony's Hardware, a place that smelled like oil, sawdust, and quiet revenge. Tony had been my supplier since the early days of my electrical career. When he saw me loading up motion sensors, floodlights, and a roll of heavy-gauge wire, he raised an eyebrow. "Starting a stadium, Marcus?" "Just illuminating a problem," I said. Tony laughed. "Now that's the kind of project I like." By nightfall, I'd turned my front yard into something special. 8 motion-activated LED floodlights arranged exactly 6 feet apart along my boundary. Each one weather-sealed, waterproof, and wired through a relay system I built myself. Even if one failed, the others would still trigger, because I don't build temporary fixes. I build systems that survive hurricanes. It wasn't about hurting anyone. It was about visibility. If she wanted attention so badly, I was going to give her a stage brighter than Broadway. Monday, 7:47 a.m. The first test came on schedule. Karen's white BMW roared down the street, gliding like a shark in a sea of asphalt. The second her tires touched my grass went boom. 8 lights flared on at once. 8,000 lumens of pure daylight blasted through her windshield. The screech of her brakes was music. She froze, stunned, blinded. For 30 seconds she sat there, probably seeing stars. Then she stomped the gas pedal and tore through anyway, sending clumps of dirt flying into the air like confetti. I smiled, sipping my coffee. Round 1, success, Tuesday, 7:47 a.m. The next morning she returned, but this time she was furious. She honked for 20 straight seconds as if the lights had insulted her royal majesty. The noise woke up half the neighborhood. Curtains moved. People peeked out. Someone even recorded her. I watched from the window, arms crossed. If she wanted a show, I'd make sure the whole neighborhood got front row seats. Wednesday morning, I installed an official metal sign, private property, monitored by electronic surveillance. The smell of fresh vinyl and the click of bolts going into concrete filled the air. Every letter gleamed in the sunlight, a polite warning with legal teeth. But that evening at 10:41 p.m., my security system beeped. Motion detected. When I checked the feed, I couldn't help but laugh. There she was, Karen Whitmore, dressed head to toe in black, like a burglar straight out of a sitcom. Black hoodie, black yoga pants, designer shoes that probably cost more than my entire lighting setup. She crept across the lawn with a garden trowel, kicking, yanking, smashing. One by one my lights fell, but my cameras caught everything. Every kick, every grunt, every flash of her furious face in the infrared glow. What Karen didn't know was that the system she was vandalizing had a battery backup. One I'd installed from my old hospital wiring days. Even after she cut the main line, the secondary circuit stayed live. Every second of her tantrum recorded in high definition. When she realized the little red light on the camera was still blinking, she froze, eyes wide, then ran back toward her BMW like a raccoon caught in the trash, and Friday morning came with a letter. HOA complaint. Notice. Excessive exterior lighting disturbing neighborhood. Tranquility. Signed K. Whitmore, HOA treasurer. I actually laughed out loud. The paper was so thin it almost tore in my hands. So she breaks my lights, then complains about them. Classic Karen logic, but I wasn't angry. Because I had something she didn't. Evidence. That afternoon, I filed a vandalism claim with my insurance company. They sent out an investigator. A quiet man with laser measuring tools and the patience of a saint. He examined every broken fixture, every bent post, every disturbed patch of soil. Then, while jotting notes, he paused. "Mr. Hale," he said slowly, adjusting his instrument, "you might want to double-check your survey records. These property markers are off, way off. How off?" I asked. "About 12 feet east of where they should be." My heartbeat slowed. 12 feet. 12 feet of stolen land. That night, I couldn't sleep. I pulled out my old blueprints again, the ones from when I bought the place. And just like that, I saw it. The numbers didn't match. Maybe someone married to a construction developer, had quietly shifted my boundary lines. That realization changed everything. Saturday morning, I called an old friend, Pete Dalton, retired surveyor, ex-union guy like me. He owed me a few favors. "Pete, I think my property line's been messed with." "How bad?" "Let's just say the HOA queen's been using it as her racetrack." "Say no more." "I'll bring my gear." Wednesday, 10 a.m. Pete arrived with 2 crewmen, laser levels, and coffee strong enough to melt concrete. The buzz of their measuring equipment filled the quiet suburban air, mixed with the smell of cut grass and distant lawnmowers. After an hour, Pete whistled. "Jesus, Marcus, you've got a full 18 feet of land missing here. That retaining wall she built, it's sitting 4 feet onto your property. 18 feet. That wasn't an accident. That was theft." Pete showed me both surveys, the original one from 2019 and an amended version from 2020 signed by Derek Whitmore himself. The note said, "Boundary correction for municipal compliance." Correction? My ass. Derek had literally stolen a chunk of my land, on paper, to give his wife more room to drive her precious BMW. That evening, I was out marking the new survey stakes when I heard the click of high heels on pavement. Karen was marching toward me, her expression sour enough to curdle milk. "What's this?" she snapped, pointing at the bright orange stakes. "A miracle," I said. "Turns out the land you've been driving over belongs to me. All 18 feet of it." She blinked, color draining from her face. "That's impossible." "My husband—" "Yeah," I interrupted. Your husband signed the fake survey. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. Listen, blue-collar boy. You think you can come into my neighborhood and start digging holes? We built this community. You're just living in it. The way she said we built this community made my jaw tighten. Her perfume mixed with the scent of wet soil and burnt rubber from her tires. I didn't answer. Just stared at her until she finally stormed off, her heels clacking down the driveway like gunshots. That night, I called 2 people. My insurance company's legal department, who confirmed property fraud often starts exactly like this. A concrete contractor I trusted, because I already knew how this story was going to end. But before I built anything, I needed one more piece of proof, so I filed a Freedom of Information request with the city, asking for every construction complaint filed in the last year. When the papers arrived, smelling faintly of ink and bureaucracy, my hands actually trembled. 47 complaints, all signed by the same name, Karen Whitmore. Noise violations, paint colors, lawn height, fence styles. She'd been tormenting half the neighborhood for years. But 12 of those cases had one thing in common: a signature from Dave Morrison, the same code enforcement officer who'd approved Derek's construction permits. And just like that, I realized what I was up against: a full network of corruption. Karen wasn't just an entitled neighbor. She was the queen of a suburban empire built on intimidation and dirty paperwork. But here's the thing about empires: they always forget one rule. Every empire can fall. Especially when the man they pick a fight with happens to know exactly how to lay a foundation that never moves. Sometimes the truth doesn't hide in shadows. It hides beneath the soil, waiting for someone stubborn enough to dig. The day Pete's crew finished their survey, I didn't celebrate. I just stood in the yard, staring at the bright orange markers stabbing through the grass like warning signs from the universe. 18 feet of stolen land. That's what Karen and her husband had taken. Not by accident, by design. And the worst part, they'd probably done it before. When the survey team left, I sat at the kitchen table under the warm hum of the pendant light, both surveys laid out side by side. The original, dated 2019, and the corrected version from 2020. Same block, same property codes, different boundaries, and right there at the bottom, the signature that turned my blood cold: Derek Whitmore, licensed contractor. Claire was folding laundry nearby when she noticed me staring too long at those papers. "You've been sitting there for an hour," she said quietly. "You okay?" "He moved it," I muttered. "He actually moved the damn line." "You mean, like a mistake?" "No mistake. They redrew the map." She sat down next to me, her trembling hands brushing the edge of the page. "You think she knew? Karen doesn't do anything she doesn't understand." She knew exactly what she was stealing. Outside, the sprinklers hissed softly, the same sound that used to calm me, but that night it felt different. It sounded like static, like power waiting to arc. For 3 nights I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those orange flags fluttering in the wind. Every time I blinked, I heard Karen's voice, like smug, entitled, "You'll regret this." And maybe I would. But not in the way she thought. I called Pete again on the 4th day. "I need certified copies," I told him. "Stamped, sealed, notarized. The whole deal." "Both surveys?" he asked. "Every single page." He hesitated. "Marcus, this could turn into a fight you can't walk away from." I smiled to myself. Good thing I'm not planning to walk away. The next morning, I was out measuring the edge of the lawn when I heard that familiar click-click of high heels. Karen's perfume arrived before she did. Sharp, floral, fake. "You can't just put up flags like that," she snapped. "It looks ridiculous." "Funny," I said. "That's what I thought about your driving." Her lips thinned. "My husband built this neighborhood. You really want to pick this fight?" "I'm not picking anything," I replied calmly. "I'm reclaiming what's mine." She leaned closer, lowering her voice to a hiss. "People like you never last long here. You think the HOA's on your side? You'll be lucky if they don't fine you for breathing." I met her glare with silence. I'd learned long ago that silence unnerves bullies more than shouting ever could. Finally, she turned on her heel and walked away, muttering something about teaching me a lesson. As her footsteps faded, I looked down at the boundary markers again. Bright orange, unmoving, like proof that truth, and when measured properly, doesn't bend. The first letter came 2 days later. Official letterhead, city seal. Notice of violation. Unpermitted electrical installations. I laughed, out loud. She'd actually weaponized the city now. The signature at the bottom read, Dave Morrison, Code Enforcement Officer, $1,200 in fines. 10 days to remove unauthorized electrical systems. What Karen didn't realize was that I'd been filing permits since before she learned how to spell landscaping. Low voltage. Lighting under 30 volts doesn't need a permit. Not then, not now. It was a bluff and a scare tactic dressed up in legal paper. But I'd seen 1,000 bluffs before, and I knew exactly how to cut the power behind them. That evening, I called Big Jim, my old foreman from the city contracts division. He'd wired schools, hospitals, courthouses, and knew every inspector in Millbrook by name. When I mentioned Morrison, Jim let out a low whistle. That guy? He's been golfing with Derek for years. Used to be a straight shooter until the divorce. Now he'll sign off on anything for a free membership at the country club. I didn't need to hear more. That explained the fast approvals, the missing permits, the corrected surveys. They weren't mistakes. They were trades. Golf games and envelopes disguised as paperwork, so I decided to trace the current. The next day, I filed a Freedom of Information request for all HOA complaints and inspection approvals in the past year. The clerk, a tired-looking woman behind a dusty counter, handed me a heavy stack of photocopies that smelled like ink and bureaucracy. When I got home, I spread them out on the kitchen table. Claire brought me tea and sat quietly as I flipped through page after page. 47 complaints. 19 different households. Every single one signed by the same hand, Kay Whitmore. She went after everyone, Claire whispered. Yeah, I muttered. Anyone who didn't bow. Fence colors, mailboxes, bird feeders. She'd turned neighborhood peace into a weaponized checklist. But halfway through the pile, I found something that froze me mid-page. A construction approval for Whitmore Residence expansion. Signed and sealed by Dave Morrison. Dated exactly 3 weeks after Derek's fake survey correction. That was the wire connecting it all. Gotcha, I whispered. I wasn't the only one tired of her tyranny. When I stopped by Tony's Hardware for new cabling, I ran into Mrs. Patterson, the 78-year-old retired schoolteacher, who'd lived here since before the Whitmores arrived. She lowered her voice. She tried to get my mailman fired, she said. Claimed he stepped on her flower bed. I started keeping notes. 2 years' worth of them. She pulled a small notebook from her purse, pages filled with times, dates, names. I realized I wasn't fighting alone anymore. I was just the first one willing to push back hard enough to make it count. That evening I met Sarah Kim, a real estate attorney recommended by my insurance investigator. Her office was filled with maps, blueprints, and the quiet hum of an air conditioner that sounded like background tension. After examining my surveys and the complaint list, she exhaled slowly. Mr. Hale, this isn't coincidence. This is systemic. Your neighbor's husband has been shifting property lines for profit. You could sue them for property fraud, possibly a class action if others join. What would happen to them? If it's proven, fines, license suspension, maybe jail. I nodded but said nothing. Money, punishment, and that wasn't the kind of justice I wanted. I wanted something that couldn't be undone. What if I wanted to install something? I asked, on my land. Nothing illegal, just permanent, her brow arched. Decorative landscaping? Let's call it that, Sarah smiled. As long as it meets safety standards, you're within your rights. That was all I needed to hear. That night, I returned home with a notepad and ruler. The sky was clear, the moon washing the grass in silver light. I stood at the property edge, right where Karen's BMW always crossed, and marked the spot. Claire came out in her robe. You're working late again, she teased. Just planning something solid, I said. How solid? Concrete. She laughed softly, unaware of the layers behind that word. Because in my mind, I could already hear the pour, the rumble of cement, the clang of rebar, the satisfying permanence of it all. The next few days felt like electricity before a storm. Silent. Heavy waiting to discharge. Neighbors whispered. Karen glared from her driveway, pretending not to stare. And somewhere in City Hall, Dave Morrison was probably getting ready to inspect my property again. But I was ready for them all. Every document copied. Every photo stored. Every move calculated to code, because this wasn't just a property dispute anymore. This was a blueprint for justice, engineered by an electrician who finally decided to build something unbreakable. Some people fight their battles in courtrooms. I fight mine in circuits, measurements, and evidence. When you've spent 30 years wiring power into skyscrapers, you learn to spot bad connections. And that week, the whole city felt like a loose wire ready to spark. 2 mornings after Sarah Kim handed me the legal documents, my phone buzzed. The caller ID read City Code Enforcement. I answered slowly. Marcus Hale speaking. Mr. Hale, this is Officer Morrison. We received another complaint about your lighting system. I'll need to perform a follow-up inspection today, of course. Karen had pushed another button. Bring your clipboard, I said, but this time I'll be filming. There was silence on the other end, then a curt, do what you need to do. By noon, the white city truck rolled up my driveway like an unwanted delivery. Morrison climbed out wearing mirrored sunglasses that couldn't quite hide the guilt underneath. He smelled of cologne and cheap power. Same issue as before, he said, clicking his pen. Funny, I replied, because the first issue never existed. He started measuring wire runs, pretending not to notice the GoPro strapped to my mailbox, recording every move. Looks like commercial-grade fixtures, he murmured. Code says residential low voltage, I shot back. Page 413, subsection D. You remember that one, right? He froze. That pause told me everything. He wasn't inspecting. He was acting. When he left, he slid a folded yellow citation into my hand. For a $200 fine. Repeat violation. I watched his truck disappear down the road, then whispered to myself, Gotcha, you crooked wire. That night, I called Big Jim again. He answered over the sound of hammers and country radio. Jim, your friend Morrison just tried round 2. Figures, Jim said. Word is, Derek Whitmore's been keeping him in golf clubs and whiskey. Check the permit log. You'll see patterns. That word buzzed in my brain like static. So I did. Millbrook City Hall smelled like lemon polish and dusted lies. I sat in the archives room flipping through binders thick enough to stop bullets. Every file told the same story. Projects tied to Whitmore construction were processed twice as fast. Inspections approved with 0 notes. And guess whose signature showed up every single time? But here was the shocking part. Derek Whitmore wasn't just altering my boundary. He'd been redrawing the whole neighborhood, 6 homes, maybe more. Each one losing slivers of land that mysteriously aligned with the Whitmore's expansion plans. I photographed everything. Page numbers, signatures, dates. My phone became a silent witness. The next afternoon, I parked outside City Hall and waited. When Morrison came out, sunglasses on, clipboard under his arm, I stepped from the truck. We need to talk, I said. About what? About your signature on fraudulent permits. He tried to push past me, but I blocked his path. You think I'm scared of an electrician? He scoffed. No, I said quietly. You should be scared of math. It doesn't lie. I handed him copies of his own permits, highlighted and time-stamped. Either you explain these, or I send them to the state licensing board tomorrow. For a second, he looked like a man whose house of cards had finally met gravity. He didn't answer. Just walked away faster than a guilty current. By evening, the story had spread. Mrs. Patterson came over with her spiral notebook. The Hendersons brought photos of their shrinking backyard. Even the Garcias, new to the block, showed me their property deed, already corrected by Whitmore Construction. Our living room turned into a war room. Coffee cups, blueprints, maps, each complaint another voltage drop in Karen's empire. They've been robbing everyone, I said. Then let's stop them together, Mrs. Patterson declared. For the first time, the neighborhood didn't feel afraid of Karen Whitmore. It felt awake. 2 days later, Morrison showed up at my door again, without his clipboard this time. His eyes were bloodshot, his voice low. I can't sleep, he admitted. You were right. Derek forged the surveys. He made me sign off on them. Said it was streamlining. Then tell the city, I said. You don't get it. If I go down, half the department goes with me. I studied him for a moment, then said, Then help me bring them all down the right way. He nodded once and left. By morning, an anonymous envelope landed in my mailbox, dozens of photocopied internal emails, linking Derek Whitmore to fake approvals and bribery schedules. The fuse had officially been lit. Sarah Kim filed the complaint with the state's ethics board. Within a week, auditors swarmed Millbrook's building division. Laptops confiscated, files boxed, The same office that fined me now reeked of panic. Karen showed up at my driveway the next morning, hair perfect, voice venomous. "You think you've won something? You've embarrassed powerful people." "No," I said. "I've just introduced them to accountability." Her nails dug into her palms. "This isn't over." "You're right," I said, smiling. "We haven't even poured the concrete yet." She didn't understand what that meant. Not yet. That night, I pulled out a clean sheet of drafting paper and started sketching. A circle 8 inches thick, a foundation 5 feet deep, rebar cross-braced every 18 inches. To anyone else, it looked like a decorative bollard. To me, it was justice set in stone. Claire watched from the doorway, arms folded. "You're really going to do this, aren't you?" "I've already done it," I said, penciling the last line. "This isn't revenge," she said softly. "This is closure." "Maybe they're the same thing," I murmured. Outside, thunder rolled somewhere far off, the kind that promises rain and change. Over the next few days, deliveries started arriving at my driveway. Bags of quick-set concrete, steel rods, decorative granite caps. Miguel from Industrial Concrete stopped by to confirm specs. "You're building a fortress?" he joked. "Just a reminder," I said. "That boundaries matter." He nodded, respectful. "You want it to last?" "Longer than their lies." That evening, as the sun dipped behind the houses, I stood at the edge of my property, the same place her BMW carved its daily shortcut, and marked the exact coordinates for the pour. Every measurement perfect. Every inch legal. Every ounce permanent. They built their empire on paper. I was about to build mine in concrete. When people cross a line long enough, you stop warning them. You build one they can't cross again. The plans had been drawn, the permits filed, the measurements checked twice. Now it was time to turn paper into permanence. The morning of the installation was cool and bright, the kind of day contractors love. A flatbed truck rumbled down Oak Ridge Lane, brakes sighing as it stopped in front of my house. Bags of quick-set concrete, steel mesh, and a narrow concrete form waited in the back. Miguel, the foreman, hopped out. "You sure about the placement, Mr. Hale?" "Dead sure," I said. 6 inches inside the legal boundary. "I measured it myself," he laughed. "That close?" "Close is the point." He didn't ask questions after that. We dug the footing 5 feet deep, deeper than any decorative post had a right to be. By mid-afternoon, the first wheelbarrow poured gray slurry into the form. The air smelled of limestone and inevitability. Every shovel scrape sounded like punctuation. Never. Again. Claire watched from the porch, sweater pulled tight around her shoulders. "It's just concrete, right?" "To you, maybe," I said. To her, it's a mirror. The crew finished just before sunset. We smoothed the surface, set the decorative granite cap, and left it to cure overnight. To anyone driving by, it looked like a harmless landscape post, an accent to match the mailbox. But beneath that polished surface lay half a ton of rebar-laced truth. For 2 days, I kept my distance. The concrete hardened, pale and solid, while gossip rippled down the block. Neighbors slowed their cars, curious. Karen didn't. She pretended not to see it, but I knew she did. That night, I sat in the dark living room, floodlight glowing across the lawn. Claire joined me on the couch. "You think this ends it?" "No," I said quietly. "It just draws the final line." "Then maybe that's enough." Outside, the sprinklers whispered over new grass. For the first time in weeks, the sound didn't make me flinch. Friday morning, 7:42 a.m. The neighborhood was waking up, dogs barking, garage doors humming. I heard the familiar growl of Karen's BMW turning the corner too fast as always. Through the window, I watched her take that lazy diagonal across my lawn. Old habits die harder than pride. She never noticed the new post. Not until the front bumper met it head-on. The impact cracked through the quiet like thunder. Metal on stone, airbag deployment, a puff of white dust. For a moment, time slowed. Birds exploded from the trees, startled into the blue sky. I was already halfway out the door. The BMW sat skewed across the driveway, hood crumpled around the solid gray column. Steam hissed from the radiator. The decorative granite cap hadn't moved an inch. Karen stumbled out, dazed but unhurt, hair wild, perfume sharp in the morning air. Her heels clicked on the asphalt like punctuation marks of disbelief. You did this!" she shouted, voice trembling. "No," I said evenly. "Physics did." She looked from the bollard to the camera above my porch, the one that had recorded every second. Her face went pale. "You're finished," she yelled. "I'll call the police." "Good," I said. "I'll show them the permits." Neighbors were already emerging, phones raised, whispers spreading like fire in dry grass. Claire joined me on the lawn, quiet strength beside me. "Is she okay?" she asked softly. "Bruised ego. That's all." Karen sat on the curb, phone in hand, staring at the unbroken post that had just defeated German engineering. When the police arrived, the officer recognized me from the code violation fiasco. He examined the scene, the markings, the paperwork I handed over. After 5 minutes, he nodded. "Everything here's legal," he said. "Boundary confirmed. No damage to public property." "So I'm not in trouble?" I asked. "Sir, you built it inside your line." "She hit you." Karen's protest dissolved into background noise, half sob, half outrage. The officer gave her a ticket for reckless driving and left. By afternoon, everyone knew. Photos of the wrecked BMW and the unbroken bollard hit the community Facebook page. "Concrete 1, BMW 01" caption read. For the first time, the neighborhood laughed. Even Mrs. Patterson knocked on my door with a plate of cookies. "To celebrate proper boundaries," she said with a wink. That evening, after the tow truck hauled the car away, I sat on the porch beside the cured post. The granite cap was warm from the sun, smooth under my hand. I could still smell the faint tang of motor oil in the air. "You feel better?" Claire asked. "Better's not the word," I said. "Balanced, maybe," she smiled. "You finally stopped fixing other people's wiring." "Yeah," I said. "Just had to ground it first." The floodlight clicked on, washing the lawn in calm white light. No shadows left to hide in. In the days that followed, something strange happened. The HOA stopped calling. The city inspectors vanished. Even the whispers at the mailboxes quieted. Karen retreated behind closed blinds. Her husband stopped showing up to council meetings. And for the first time since we moved here, Oak Ridge Lane felt peaceful. The concrete stood there, simple, solid, silent. A reminder that boundaries aren't drawn with ink. They're poured with intention. Justice doesn't always wear a robe. Sometimes it wears a granite cap and waits patiently for impact. When corruption starts to crumble, it doesn't fall quietly. It cracks, groans, and takes everyone who leaned on it down with it. For a week after the crash, the neighborhood lived in a strange quiet. No more complaint letters, no more inspectors. Just the hum of sprinklers and the distant sound of construction somewhere else, someone else's problem. But silence, I've learned, often means pressure building underground. 3 mornings later, Sarah Kim called me before sunrise. Her tone was sharp, energized. "Marcus, you might want to sit down. State auditors walked into City Hall yesterday with federal agents. Your name's on the complaint that triggered it." My coffee went cold in my hand. For months I'd lived inside this war. Now it was moving beyond the fence line. "What happens now?" I asked. "They're seizing records, questioning staff." "It's bigger than we thought." Bigger. That word echoed through me like an aftershock. By noon, news vans crowded the City Hall steps. The same office that fined me for unpermitted lighting now sat behind yellow tape. Headlines crawled across local TV. "Building inspector under federal review." "Millbrook construction scandal widens." Neighbors texted screenshots. Karen stopped answering her door. Derek's white pickup disappeared from the driveway and reappeared behind a lawyer's office 2 towns over. The empire was shaking itself apart. That evening, Morrison, the once crooked inspector, showed up at my porch again. He looked 10 years older, carrying a small manila folder like it was a confession. "You were right," he said quietly. "It went higher than me. Council approvals, real estate kickbacks, forged signatures. Derek Whitmore was the hub. Why tell me now? Because I'm done being their fuse. I'm blowing the circuit." He handed me the folder. Inside were scanned emails, payment records, and one photograph. Derek and a city councilman shaking hands beside a construction permit. Evidence, wired neatly together. Within days, the dominoes started falling. The councilman resigned for personal reasons. Derek's contracting license was suspended. Karen's social feeds went dark, and every homeowner she'd bullied started talking, publicly. Mrs. Patterson turned her notebooks over to the investigators. The Hendersons testified about their corrected backyard boundary. Even the Garcia spoke on camera, calm and clear, telling the story of intimidation and deceit. The same neighborhood Karen ruled through fear now dismantled her reputation piece by piece. It was a gray Thursday when the inevitable happened. Federal agents in navy jackets pulled into the Whitmore driveway. Neighbors watched from behind curtains as Derek was led out in handcuffs, chin high, eyes hollow. Karen followed minutes later, screaming that it was all a misunderstanding. But cameras don't care about excuses. They care about pictures. From my porch, I didn't cheer. I just stood there, hand resting on the cool granite cap of the bollard, the monument that started it all. Concrete 1. Corruption. The following week, City Hall held an emergency session. Every permit issued under Derek's company was frozen pending audit. Morrison resigned quietly but left a full statement that named every player. Reporters called my house nonstop. One asked, "Mr. Hale, do you feel vindicated?" "No," I said. "I feel tired. Vindication's for headlines. I just wanted peace." And peace, oddly enough, was starting to return. With Karen gone, something remarkable happened. People started waving again. Lawns turned green instead of political. The HOA board elected new members, real neighbors, not tyrants. They even asked me to help redesign the community lighting plan. I laughed, then said yes. Claire planted new rose bushes along the edge of the lawn right beside the bollard. She called it the Line of Peace, fitting name, I told her. "You built it," she said. "Might as well let it bloom." Late one evening, I sat alone on the porch. The floodlight hummed softly, painting the concrete post in a halo of white. Somewhere down the street, a child's bicycle bell rang, and the air smelled of fresh rain. For the first time in months, I could hear my own breathing without tension hiding underneath it. "You did it," Claire whispered behind me. "No," I said. "The truth did. I just gave it a place to stand. Every community has a current running through it. Some people use that current to build light. Others try to steal the voltage for themselves. But no matter how clever the wiring, corruption always trips the breaker eventually. The Whitmores built their empire on stolen lines. I built my boundary on solid ground. And in the end, gravity decided whose foundation would last. When the noise fades and the dust settles, what's left isn't victory. It's the shape of what you protected. Millbrook Heights had always looked perfect from the outside. Manicured lawns, identical mailboxes, the illusion of harmony. But now, months after the Whitmores' downfall, it finally felt perfect. Not because it was polished, but because it was honest. The morning news no longer mentioned arrests or hearings. Instead, it ran a small segment about neighborhood renewal. That's what they called it. I called it reconnection. The city cleared Derek's fraudulent surveys from the record. Property lines returned to their rightful places, an invisible map of fairness running beneath every yard. The HOA met in the community center for the first time without fear or whispering. I sat in the back while Mrs. Patterson, now board president, read a proposal. Community garden open to all residents. Unanimous approval. Later she approached me. "Marcus, we want you to oversee the electrical layout. Solar lights. No permits needed." "You sure?" I joked. "Positive. You're the only one we trust with wiring now." That made me smile. Not pride. Relief. A few weeks later, the neighborhood gathered in my yard. Children chased each other over the grass that used to bear tire marks. At the center stood the bollard, still solid, still untouched. We'd cleaned it, polished it, and added a small bronze plaque that read, "Boundaries built on truth." Claire placed a single white rose at its base. "You built this to stop her," she said softly. "Now it keeps the peace." The crowd applauded, not for revenge, but for closure. The kind of applause that sounds like gratitude, not noise. Claire's health had wavered through all the chaos, but peace suited her. She spent mornings tending roses, evenings reading on the porch. Sometimes I caught her staring at the concrete post as if it were a lighthouse. "You know," she said one night, "that thing saved more than a lawn." "What do you mean?" "It saved you from yourself. You stopped fighting everything. You started building again." She was right. For years I'd defined myself by fixing other people's mistakes. But this was the first thing I built that didn't need repairs. Sarah Kim called one afternoon with an idea. "Marcus, a few residents want to start a scholarship, the Community Justice Fund, a small grant each year for local trade students. They want your name on it." At first I refused. "I'm no hero, Sarah." "You're proof that one person standing firm can change a system," she said. "That's enough." So we did it. Every spring, The fund sends one student to technical school, someone who believes in wiring things right, literally and metaphorically. The first recipient was a quiet kid named Luis. He told me he wanted to build light, not arguments. I shook his hand and thought, that's how it starts. Rumor said Karen took a plea deal. Community service, restitution, silence. Sometimes I saw her car, smaller now, humbler, driving through town. She never looked my way and I never waved. Forgiveness, I realized, doesn't need conversation. It just needs distance. Spring came again. The new community garden bloomed behind the park. Rows of vegetables, benches, solar lamps powered by the same circuits I'd designed. At dusk, when the lights flickered on one by one, the glow felt different. It wasn't vengeance anymore. It was renewal. Children laughed where arguments once echoed. Neighbors shared tools instead of complaints. The air itself seemed lighter, as if the neighborhood had finally taken a deep breath. One evening I stood beside the bollard, now framed by rose bushes and soft LED light. Claire joined me, slipping her hand into mine. "You think people will remember what it meant?" she asked. "Maybe not the details," I said, "but they'll feel it. Every time they walk by, they'll know this place stood for something that didn't bend." She smiled. "Then that's enough legacy for anyone." The wind shifted through the leaves, carrying the faint sound of laughter from the garden. For the first time in a long time, I felt the current of life moving the right direction. Steady, grounded, safe. Justice isn't about punishment. It's about building something that lasts beyond the noise. And sometimes all it takes is one solid foundation, poured by hand, measured in truth.